Montana Territory. June 1879, the sun was barely up when Xalen Foster spotted the figure walking along the fence line slim, shoulders squared, hands wrapped in cloth even in the heat. No one came out this far unless they were running from something or had nowhere left to go. He set his shovel down and watched her approach, dust rolling around her boots. She stopped at the gate but did not touch it. "I heard you needed help," she said, voice steady, chin raised. "I can do laundry, cooking, mending, and I do not scare easy." Xalen studied her. She was young, maybe mid-20s, but there was a tiredness in her eyes that did not belong to youth. Her hands were wrapped in long, worn muslin strips, tied neat but hiding something. "What's your name?" he asked. "Liora James." He waited. She did not explain the cloth, he did not ask. "I got a bunkhouse," he said. "It is clean, you will have your own space, pay is fair." She nodded once, like she had made up her mind before she got there. He opened the gate. By sundown, Liora had cleaned the kitchen, swept the porch, and cooked a stew better than anything Xalen had tasted in months. She moved quiet, worked hard, and never once took off the cloth around her hands. The children noticed first. "Why do you wear rags on your hands?" Wren, his daughter, asked after dinner, voice soft. Liora froze. Her spoon hovered above the stew pot. Xalen saw her shoulders tense, and before she could speak, he stepped in. "Wren, that is not polite," he said gently. "But I just want to know." Liora turned, met Wren's eyes, then slowly unwrapped one hand. The skin was twisted and pink with deep scars that ran from wrist to fingertip. Not fresh, but not old either. Her fingers were whole, but the damage had changed them. "I got caught in a fire," she said plainly. 2 years ago, back in Kansas, my father's barn, I went in after my brothers. They made it out, I did not." Wren blinked. "Did it hurt?" "Yes." "Does it still?" Liora hesitated. "Not the way you mean." The 7-year-old nodded like she understood more than she should, then leaned forward and took Leora's hand in both of hers. "I think it is brave," she whispered. Leora's eyes filled. She turned away before anyone could see too much. Later, when the children were asleep, Xalen found her out by the water pump, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair damp from the heat. "You did not have to show her," he said. "She asked," Liora replied simply. "And I am tired of hiding." He nodded, then leaned against the post. "Folks around here are not always kind," he said, "especially about things they do not understand." "They were not kind in Kansas either," she said. "I was engaged before the fire." He called it a mercy when he broke it off. Xalen looked at her hands, then at her face, and saw strength where others had only seen damage. "If you are looking for work, I have it, but I have a deal to offer too." She raised an eyebrow. "I have 2 kids," he said. "Wren and Xalen. Their mother died 3 years ago. I can feed them, raise them, teach them to work. But they need more than that. They need someone steady, someone kind." "And you want me to be that?" she asked, voice unreadable. "I am not asking for marriage, not unless you want it," he said. "But if you stay, if you help raise them, you will have a home, no more wandering, no more hiding." She looked at him for a long time. "And what do you get out of it?" "Peace," he said. "A little help, maybe something good for once." Liora studied the dirt beneath her boots, then the stars above. "I will stay," she said, "for the children and for myself." The days passed steady after that. Liora settled into the rhythm of the farm. She braided Wren's hair in the mornings and taught Xalen how to hold a broom without dragging it. She cooked meals, fixed shirts, whispered stories at bedtime. The children clung to her like roots to water. Xalen watched the change from afar. Her laugh came easier now. She let the bandages stay off when it was just them. Her scars were no longer something she shrank from. One evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, the sun dipping low behind the hills, Liora shifted in her chair. "I was not sure I would ever feel like a person again," she said quietly. "You are more than that," Xalen replied. "You are part of this place now." She looked over at him, something soft in her gaze. "You meant it, about the deal." "I do not say things I do not mean. And if I wanted more than just the deal," his breath caught. "I would not turn you away," he said. She smiled, slow and sure. I am not ready yet, she said, but I might be. I will wait, he said without hesitation, and he meant it. One night a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked over the hills, rattling windows. Xalen woke crying, and before Xalen could get up, Liora was already across the room, gathering the little boy into her arms. I had a dream you were gone, Xalen sobbed. I am right here, she whispered, holding him close. I am not going anywhere. Xalen watched from the doorway, heart full. Later, when she returned to her room, he followed. Thank you, he said. You do not need to thank me for loving them, she said. His heart stumbled. Liora blinked, realizing what she had said. Do you love them? He asked. Yes, she whispered. I think I love all of you. He stepped closer. Then stay, not for the deal, not just for them, stay for me too. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I want to, and she did. The wheat was taller than a man's knees by early July, the stalks thickening under long hours of sun and the blessing of 2 soft rains. Liora kept to her chores with a quiet efficiency, but the edges of her movements had softened. She no longer flinched when Xalen threw his arms around her waist, or when Wren tugged her toward the creek to look at frogs under rocks. That morning, Xalen found her kneeling by the chicken coop, sleeves rolled high as she worked liniment into a hen's swollen foot. Her touch was firm, practiced. She didn't notice him at first. You've handled livestock before, he said, crouching beside her. Once you've wrangled a mule with a cracked hoof and a sour temper, most things feel simple, she replied, not looking up. Where'd you learn that? My uncle's farm outside Abilene. After the fire, I stayed with them a while. He had more animals than good sense. Did you like it there? She paused and looked toward the barn. I liked the animals. People were harder. Xalen didn't press. Instead, he lifted a basket of eggs and held it for her. As she dropped in the last one, their fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. That night, once the children were down, Liora lingered by the stove. The fire had burned low, throwing long shadows across the floorboards. Xalen poured 2 cups of coffee, though neither of them needed the extra heat. I've been thinking on building a smokehouse, he said. Winter's hit hard up here, thought I'd cure some meat this year. I can help, she said. My mother used to rub the salt in until her hands cracked, said it was the only way to make it last. He glanced at the cloth draped over her lap. She hadn't wrapped her hands in days. Do they ever feel better? He asked. She flexed her fingers. They ache when it's cold or when I carry too much, but they're mine. I've learned to use them again. He sat across from her and studied the light pooling in her eyes. I don't think I ever saw you afraid, he said. I was once. After the fire, everything tasted like smoke. I'd wake up choking even when the air was clean. He waited. My mother didn't speak to me for weeks after. She said I'd brought shame to the family, letting the neighbors see a woman disfigured. She wouldn't let me sit at the church socials. Xalen's jaw tightened. That's not shame, that's survival. She didn't see it that way. And what about your brothers? They wrote me letters at first. But they stopped after a while. I think their wives didn't want me around. She looked up at him, her voice even. I was used to being left behind. He reached across the table and laid his hand over hers. You're not left behind here. She didn't speak, but she didn't move her hand either. The next week, they began tearing down the old shed to make room for the smokehouse. Liora held the boards steady while Xalen swung the hammer, her stance braced and sure. Each time he glanced at her, her brow was furrowed in concentration, her lips pressed flat except for when she caught him looking. Then she smiled, just a little. Midway through the day, Wren came running with a handful of currants, cheeks red and skirt stained with berry juice. I found them near the fence line, she said, breathless. They're sweet. Liora crouched to examine them. These are good. You've got an eye for ripe ones. Xalen watched her tuck a few into her apron pocket and brush Wren's hair back with gentle fingers. It struck him that Liora had never needed to be taught how to love them. It had come from somewhere deeper. That night he found her on the back steps, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the moon rise over the hills. I've been thinking, he said, settling beside her. Dangerous habit, he gave a quiet laugh. I know this wasn't what you expected when you came here. No, she said, but it's more than I thought I'd ever have again. He waited, letting the silence stretch between them. I used to dream about someone like you, she said, voice low. Not the face, not the hands, but the way you listen, the steadiness of you. I thought maybe it wasn't real, that I'd imagined it to keep myself going. She turned to face him fully. But you're real. And I don't want to be afraid of that. He reached for her hand, no cloth between them, and brought it to his chest. I'm not going anywhere, Liora. If you want this, it's yours. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, and let out a long breath. I do want it, she whispered. I want you. And for the first time since she arrived, she let someone hold her without flinching. By mid-August, the wind carried a sharper edge, and the cottonwoods behind the barn began to yellow along their tips. The days were still long, but the heat no longer pressed down so heavy. Liora moved through the rhythms of the homestead with a quiet belonging. She'd taken to keeping a small garden near the kitchen door, onions, late beans, and a row of herbs she coaxed from dusty soil with the same patience she gave the children. One evening, as she bent to pinch wilted leaves from the parsley, Xalen stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a strip of canvas. You ever think about getting a horse of your own? He asked, pausing by the fence where she'd laid her apron. I've never owned anything with a heartbeat, she said, brushing dirt from her fingers. Closest I came was a milk goat that liked to bite. I've got a mare that's steady as they come. She's too slow for herding and too stubborn for hauling, but smart, gentle. She might suit you. I wouldn't know what to do with her. You already do, he said. You just don't know it yet. Liora didn't answer right away. The thought of owning something that couldn't be taken from her settled in her chest like warmth seeping through wool. Maybe I'd like to try, she said, voice low. The next morning, he led the mare, a flaxen-coated thing with a broad face and eyes like damp soil, down from the paddock. Liora stood with her back straight, hands steady on the rail. She's called Fern, Xalen said. You don't have to ride her today. Just let her get used to you. Liora watched the mare's ears twitch as she approached. She didn't reach out, not yet. Instead, she stood still, letting the horse come to her. Fern dipped her head and breathed against Leora's arm. Later, Liora whispered, No one's ever offered me anything like this. Then they've been fools, he said, his voice quiet. That night, while Wren helped Liora shell beans on the porch, Wayland sat on Xalen's lap with a carving knife and a block of soft pine. The boy was shaping the beginnings of a squirrel, ears too big for its head, tail too flat. She laughs more now, Wayland said suddenly. Xalen glanced toward the step where Liora sat, her face turned toward the fading sun. She does. Do you think she'll stay forever? I hope she chooses to, Wayland nodded solemnly. I hope she chooses us. 2 weeks later, they hitched the wagon and headed into town for supplies. It was the first trip Liora had taken beyond the homestead since she arrived. She wore a clean calico dress and a borrowed sun hat, her hands bare. In the merchant's store, she moved carefully among the shelves, watching the other shoppers with a guarded calm. A woman near the back whispered something behind her hand. Another glanced at Leora's scars, eyes flicking away too fast. Liora didn't flinch, didn't hide her hands. Instead, she picked up a sack of flour and turned to Xalen. This one's the better grind, you can tell by the weight, he nodded. Whatever you think's best. Outside, after the wagon was loaded, Xalen offered her the reins. You sure? She asked. You're steadier than me in town. She took them, and they rode home with Wren curled beside her and Wayland asleep between them. That night, after the children were in bed, Liora sat by the hearth, sewing a patch onto Wayland's trousers. Xalen poured water into the basin and set it near the fire without a word. You saw them, she said after a long silence. The women at the store. I did. They looked at me like I was something worse than broken. He crouched beside her, his hand brushing her knee. You're not broken? I know that now, she said, meeting his gaze. But it still stings. I'd take that sting from you if I could. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line where sun and shadow met his cheek. You already do, she said. The next morning she saddled Fern without help. She rode her in slow circles behind the barn, legs steady, hands light on the reins. When she dismounted, Xalen was waiting. You looked like you belonged there, he said. I think I did. He stepped closer, resting his hand on the saddle's edge. I've been thinking about something, he said. She looked up, wary but curious. I want to build a room onto the house. One with a window that faces the morning sun. I thought it might be for us, not just for sleeping, but for being. Liora didn't answer at once. She stepped beside him, her fingers threading with his. I'd like that, she said. I'd like to wake where you are. He kissed her, slow and sure, and the world went quiet around them, nothing rushed, nothing pressing. Just the steadiness of two people choosing each other at last. The roof beams for the new room went up under a pale sky, the kind that promised frost before the month turned. Xalen worked with methodical care, measuring twice, cutting once, his boots silent in the sawdust. Liora stood beside the sawhorse, handing him nails from a tin and holding the ladder steady when the wind picked up over the rise. Ren asked if this room means we're married, she said, brushing a curl from her brow. He set down the hammer, eyes meeting hers. What you tell her? That it means I'm not going anywhere. Xalen's voice was low. She wasn't wrong to ask. I'm not afraid of the word, Liora said. I'm just learning how to trust what it means. He nodded once and went back to work. They didn't speak again until the sun dropped behind the ridge and the smell of wood pitch hung thick in the air. That night, Liora sat with Ren in the loft, sewing a small pillowcase from cotton scraps. Ren traced her finger along the stitched edge and whispered, "Will you sleep in the new room?" Liora smoothed the little girl's hair. "Yes. Then you'll be real family." Liora didn't correct her. Downstairs, Xalen stood by the hearth, carving the last notch into a cedar beam, one for each season since Liora had arrived. He didn't count them aloud, but he knew everyone. 3 mornings later, a rider came up the road, dusty shirt, clean boots, a straight-backed man with a storekeeper's politeness. He dismounted with care and held out a parcel wrapped in butcher paper. "Delivery from Deer Lodge," he said. "Paid in full by someone named Everett James." Liora took the parcel, her hands suddenly cold. "You all right?" Xalen asked once the rider was gone. "My brother," she said. "I haven't heard from him since the spring after the fire." Inside the wrapping was a letter and a pair of gloves, soft deerskin, dyed a deep brown, stitched with a woman's hand. The letter was short. "I heard you were living near the Bitterroots. I'm glad. I know I failed you. I hope these help when the cold comes." Liora folded the paper and set it aside. "I won't write back," she said, "but I'll wear them." Xalen said nothing. He didn't need to. Autumn deepened. The children gathered pine cones for the hearth, and Liora began setting dried apples into jars. She sang sometimes now, low and slow, half melody, half memory. Xalen didn't ask what the songs meant. He only listened. One evening after the first frost, he came in from the barn with a small wooden box. It wasn't polished, but the edges were sanded smooth. "I made this for you," he said, holding it out. Liora opened the lid. Inside lay a folded piece of linen and a single silver ring, simple, unadorned. "I didn't know how to ask," Xalen said. "Not the right way, but I want to build everything with you, not just walls and roofs." "A whole life." She touched the ring, then looked up. "I never thought I'd be asked again," she said. "Not after what I lost. You didn't lose yourself?" "I thought I had." He took her hand bare, unwrapped, honest, and pressed a kiss into the center of her palm. "I see you," he said. Liora closed her fingers around the ring and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The next morning, Ren and Xalen helped gather wildflowers from the far edge of the field, the petals already touched with frost. They married beneath the cottonwoods, the leaves falling like blessings. No preacher, no crowd, just the 4 of them and the sound of wind through the branches. That night, in the room they'd built together, Liora stood by the window, watching the first snow settle on the fence rails. Xalen came to stand behind her, hands resting lightly on her arms. It's quiet, she said. It'll always be quiet here, he said, but never empty. She turned, resting her forehead against his chest. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. You don't ever have to be. And she wasn't. Not again. They slept that night wrapped in warmth and the hush of snowfall, the kind of silence that only comes when the world has found its place, and the people in it have too. By late October, the hills lay under a hush of white, not yet thick, but enough to soften the roads and muffle the sounds of tools in the barn. Liora stood at the back door with a shawl wrapped tight, watching Xalen toss cracked corn to the hens. He moved with a boy's urgency, unaware of the chill creeping through his collar. Xalen handed her a split piece of birch for the stove. He's getting faster with chores, he said. Wants to start trapping come spring. He asked me yesterday how to skin a rabbit, she said, tugging the shawl tighter. I told him I'd show him when the ground thaws. You know how, I had to learn. There was a winter once when we only had snares and dry beans. You figure it out when your stomach reminds you. Xalen studied her face, the way she held herself without apology. You don't talk about before much. I've said enough about the fire, she said, but there were things before that, not all bad. My mother liked to braid lavender into the window curtains. My father used to hum when he patched boots. I remember those. What about the land? He asked. It was flat. Wind never stopped. You could watch a dog run for 2 days out there. Xalen chuckled, then leaned against the doorframe. I'm glad you came west. I didn't come by choice, she said, but I stayed by one. That night, after the children were asleep, Liora took needle and thread to a worn shirt Xalen had left folded on the bench. She worked by lantern light, mending the seam with even stitches, humming low under her breath. You don't have to do that, he said from the doorway. I want to, she replied. It's not the work that matters, it's the care in it. He crossed the room and sat beside her. You always had that in you. Maybe, but no one ever let me give it before. He reached for her hand, letting his thumb run over the curve of her knuckle. You give it every day now. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. Inside, the fire held steady. The following week, Wren asked if they could sew a quilt for the new bed. One with pieces from all our old things, she said. So it feels like it belongs to everyone, Liora nodded. We'll need wool from your papa's shirt and that apron you outgrew. And the hem from your first dress here, Wren added. The green one. They spent afternoons cutting patches by the window, Xalen sorting colors on the floor. Xalen carved pegs for the bed frame, pausing now and then to watch the three of them work. One evening, as Liora stitched the last square into place, she asked, Do you ever think about your wife? He nodded. Not in the way I used to. There's no sorrow left, just memory. She was kind. But she was always meant for a different life than this. Liora folded the edge of the quilt. I'm not afraid of the past, I just don't want to be measured against it. You aren't, he said. You're the life I didn't know I could have. Snow fell steady the next morning. Xalen hitched the wagon to gather fence posts from a neighbor 2 miles north. Liora packed a loaf of rye bread and a jar of beans into a sack. Take Wren with you, she said. She's been restless. You sure you'll be all right? I'll have Xalen and the dogs. We'll keep the fire high. By dusk, the wagon returned creaking under the weight of lumber. Wren jumped down with a grin, cheeks flushed, arms full of pine cones. She traded with Mrs. Keller, Xalen said. Came home with a tin of peppermints and a new hair ribbon. Liora raised an eyebrow. Did she trade your coat? No, just the apples you dried. He leaned close. You've made her brave. Later, once the children were tucked in, Xalen brought in a cedar box from the wagon bed. I didn't want to wait until spring, he said, setting it down. Inside lay a set of hand-whittled kitchen tools, spoons, ladle, mixing fork rubbed smooth with beeswax. Made from the old maple that split near the creek, he said. You've cooked your heart into this place. I wanted something that fit your hands. She picked up the ladle, turning it slowly. No one's ever made something for me that wasn't meant to change me. You don't need changing, he said. You never did. She stepped into his arms, her voice catching. I never thought I'd be safe enough to be seen. You're seen. And you're home. They stood like that until the fire burned low and the room turned quiet but warm. The first snow that stayed came in early November, blanketing the fields in quiet. The quilt lay finished on their bed, stitched with pieces of all of them. Wren's hair ribbon tied around one corner, Wayland's name inked tiny in a seam. On the morning of the first true cold, Liora rose early and lit the stove. She cracked eggs into the pan, set bread near the hearth, and watched the sky lighten beyond the frost-glazed window. Xalen came down with Wayland on his hip, both still sleep-heavy. "You should rest," he said, setting the boy at the table. "I've never felt more rested," she replied, pouring him coffee. Wren came down next, dragging her quilt behind her, yawning wide. They ate together, the four of them, with the fire crackling and the snow falling soft beyond the glass. No one spoke much. They didn't need to. Later that day, Xalen helped Liora hang the last of the dried herbs above the doorframe. She tucked the new spoons into the kitchen drawer, then reached out to touch his wrist. "I never knew peace could be so quiet," she said. "It's quiet because it's real." He kissed her temple. "And it's ours." They stood together at the window, watching Wayland chase Wren through the snowdrifts, their laughter rising into the cold air. The land stretched wide and still around them, but the house was warm, full of breath and life and love hard-earned and deeply kept. And nothing could take it from them again.